Welcome to Creating a Safe Home Environment, Identifying and Minimizing Risks. This session is for anyone living with dementia themselves or caring for someone who is experiencing cognitive changes associated with dementia. There are two broad areas of safety that are impacted by living with dementia, that of safety in the home and that of disorientation and getting lost. Today we're going to look at safety in and around the home and just touch on disorientation and getting lost, as that is a topic with enough content for a full other session. Before we launch into a discussion of safety, I'd like us to consider the impact of dementia and understand that dementia refers to a collection of symptoms caused by physical changes in a person's brain. When we're talking about living safely with dementia, we're going to be discussing how dementia symptoms like confusion, memory loss, changes in judgment, sense of time, or coordination can increase safety risks. And to keep this in the back of your mind throughout today's session, that the diseases that cause dementia cause progressive physical changes in the brain, and those changes affect how we interact with the world around us. As we get started, we need to acknowledge that while every person is unique and every person's experience of their dementia's progression is unique, there are some broad generalities that we can often make. One of those is that when we're considering safety, we expect to see some changes as the disease progresses, and things that can be handled quite easily early on in the journey become a lot more challenging as the disease progresses and the risks increase. Anytime we talk about safety, we need to acknowledge that there's no way to completely guarantee safety. Those of us without dementia have some risks in our lives, and that's also true for any person living with dementia. As much as we try to put mechanisms in place to keep everyone as safe as possible, it's not realistic to think that we're going to be able to get rid of all risk. So our goal for this session is that by the end, you'll be able to identify safety risks in the home, especially those that might intensify because of the impacts of dementia, and begin to create a plan to minimize those risks and consider some resources that can lessen some safety issues. Whether you're a person living with dementia who is also living on your own, or a care partner living with someone with dementia, or a care partner caring for someone who is not living with you, your situation will mean that there will be some differences as far as accommodations that need to be made for safety, and even more depending on whether the person living with dementia is able to be at home alone from time to time. As we look through various areas of safety together, we'll take a three-pronged approach, with the first being prevention. As much as possible, if we can prevent a problem, it makes things a whole lot easier than trying to pick up afterwards. By participating in this session and learning more about the changes that dementia is likely to bring into your lives, you are already starting the process of planning for the future and doing your best to avoid accidents and serious situations. Part of planning for the future also includes adapting the environment for future changes, and looking at the physical environment with an understanding of the changes that a progressive dementia is likely to bring. For example, in response to knowing that progressive changes in the brain often impact vision and balance, you might decide to install specialized bathtub railings and mark the edges of the tub to increase visibility, or put special locks on entrance doors or the gate to the back garden. Understanding the changes that a progressive dementia is likely to cause can help us to minimize future dangers. Another example is that knowing that reading and comprehension may become more difficult as the disease progresses, you may change the way that you store poisonous substances and what we do with electrical cords. All of these can make a big difference in terms of safety. And you may find that by the end of this presentation, you have a pretty long to-do list. And learning about safety as well as trying to plan for the future, while dementia brings more and more changes, is a big job. And we want to help. At the end of the session, you will see the contact information for our first linked dementia helpline. We are here to help you talk over any of the ideas mentioned in this session and to help you work towards next steps. Here is a cartoon of a complete safety nightmare. Take a couple of moments to point out some of the different safety risks that you notice in this image. Just about every safety infraction in the home that's possible is depicted in this image, so I'm just going to point out a few. There are cobwebs in the medicine cabinet. Think about what this might mean in terms of safety. Did you notice the smoldering cigarette perched on the table slightly behind the person watching TV? There also isn't any handrails on the stairs, and there's some boxes of things on the stairs. Am I the only one who sets things on the stairs to take them up or down the next time I go? I recognize, we all need to, that this is a safety risk. Looking at the medicine cabinet again, the cabinet is open and the medications are stored in a confusing way, with some even on the top of the cabinet and on the table below it. And the cobwebs might suggest that there's some expired medication. Looking at this, it can be pretty hard to tell which medications are the correct ones to be taken. The smoke detector is unhooked, and there's some cords running right across the entrance to the room and under the chair, right where the person's feet would come down. There's way too many things plugged into serial extension cords. The heater seems to be used as a drying rack, and there's a pile of old newspapers close by. There's a number of scatter rugs around, and they each have corners tipped up. And there's an overflowing and seemingly poorly working coffee machine that looks like it's going to tip over at any moment. Although today we'll be discussing safety from the vantage point of someone who's living with dementia, all of these things are relevant for each of us to keep in mind when we look at our own personal safety. And although we're not going to be covering an exhaustive list in this session, hopefully by the end, you'll be able to note a few red flags for yourself that you can begin to address. Keeping track of medications is difficult at the best of times. It's also something that really changes for a person living with dementia, depending on how early or late you are in the disease progression. As the disease progresses, there can be added complications if somebody's living alone and perhaps doesn't have someone in the house to help with medications. Early in the progression of dementia, you might find that a weekly pill container is enough, even if the care partner needs to be the one putting in the various pills. Or perhaps you find that a blister pack has been helpful to identify which medications to take at which times. When those times come up, you go to the blister pack and pop out the correct pills for that particular time. However, if you are the person living with dementia, as time goes on, dementia may rob you of that sense of time, and you may not be able to remember that it's noon and you're supposed to pop out the pills of your blister pack, or that you've already taken the lunchtime dose, so you pop out the next blister as well. Missing doses, or doubling or tripling doses, is understandably problematic, and depending on the medication, can be dangerous. In this case, something like an automatic pill dispenser might be more useful. There is a wide variety of automatic medication dispensers available, some of which include remote monitoring and care partner notification for missed doses. For all of them, the idea is that the medication gets loaded and the dispenser is programmed so that an alarm goes off at the appropriate time, and only those pills are dispensed. So for example, you're sitting and watching TV and the buzzer goes off, you see it's 4 o'clock, so it's time to take the green pill and the yellow pill. However, as cognitive and brain changes continue to accumulate over time, even that may become a challenge. A person may be sitting and watching TV, and when the buzzer goes off, can become agitated and distressed because they may not know what the noise is or where it's coming from. Our goal is to help someone take the medications when and how they're supposed to be taken, so we have to adapt as the disease progresses. Sometimes what can be helpful is having someone come in to monitor the medication. For example, a home support worker can pop in twice a day and give the person their medications. Keep in mind that for all of us, not just those living with dementia, it's important to ensure that a medication review is done on a regular basis. This can be especially true if something's prescribed during a hospital stay or from a specialist where it may be related to a specific issue. An overall medication review looks at all medications together and can reveal that you may no longer need a particular medication at all, or perhaps there's a newer one that might be much better, or a medication that's prescribed is still good, but you don't need as large a dose as you did when you were younger. Did you know that the way that the liver processes drugs change as we age? So you may actually need far less of a medication than you did previously. Having a pharmacist, physician, or a geriatrician who understands our aging bodies review every medication that you're taking on a regular basis can make a big difference in terms of what's actually needed. As for food, most of us are aware that with some kinds of foods, expiration dates can be pretty loosey-goosey. For example, if your milk says that it's good until the 9th, sometimes this can mean it's good until the 15th. You have a quick little whiff and know it smells good and fresh, so you keep drinking it because you know it hasn't gone bad yet. On the other hand, of course, there are other foods where you have to be much more careful about the expiration date. People living with dementia can often experience changes in their sense of smell and taste as the disease progresses. For someone without dementia, you might open a package of processed meat, have a whiff and go, "Oof, that's not good," and know to throw it out. Someone living with dementia either might not think to check with a sniff, or may not recognize that the meat smells bad and goes ahead and makes a sandwich, not taste anything different, and then afterwards get sick from it. Understanding that dementia causes changes in the brain can help us to understand that at a certain point, someone other than the person living with dementia is likely going to need to monitor the food on a regular basis and check if the food in the fridge and cupboards is fresh and safe to eat. Another thing that often comes up when we think about food and safety is food preparation. And the stove can cause a lot of challenges for a person living with dementia as time goes on. An example of this is when going to make some tea, putting an electric kettle on the stovetop and turning on the element to boil the water. In this moment, the person may be accessing information from 20 to 30 years ago when they used a stovetop kettle, but now have an electric kettle burning on the stove with wires and plastic melting all over the element, and it's a real mess and hazard. Another common example is putting a pot of food on the stove, then going to do something else, forgetting about it, and it burns or even catches fire. Or perhaps something in the oven gets burned to a crisp. This kind of thing can happen to any of us, but when it starts to happen more frequently, care partners need to step in. It could be that the stove breaker gets turned off, or an automatic shutoff gets installed, or in some ways the stove is disabled. And if the person living with dementia is no longer able to understand the consequences of their actions and the necessity of disabling the stove, it can be helpful that when the person goes to use it and notices it no longer works, that we say something like, "Oh, that's right. We need to get the repairman in. Why don't you use the microwave for now?" However, because dementia is progressive, at some point their microwave may also become unsafe. Someone may put a metal pie plate in the microwave and cause it to short out or catch fire, or cook things for 12 minutes and have it burnt, or 12 seconds and have the food still be raw. So it's something that you need to monitor gradually as the disease progresses, adjusting along the way to what works. At some point, meal delivery is often the best bet for a person who is living on their own. Many communities have a variety of meal delivery services. You might enlist the help of friends or family as well to help with this. We encourage you to connect with our First Link Dementia Helpline, and the number is available at the end of this video, and ask for a list of community resources in your area that may include local meal delivery services. Our homes almost all contain hazardous substances. Many cleaning supplies can be toxic, and sometimes locked cabinets may be the safest option. One of the easiest things to do is to simplify. Take a critical look at cleaning supplies and keep only what is necessary. So thinking about what you can get rid of and perhaps what you can substitute with something non-toxic, such as vinegar. We can clean just about as well with vinegar as we can with some heavy-duty cleaners, and vinegar is non-toxic. It can be also helpful to clearly mark containers, but knowing that at some point the person with dementia will not be able to read what's written on the container. So it's important not to rely only on labels over the long term. Thinking about this, it can be a good idea not to put substances into other containers that can be easily mistaken for something else. So for example, your bleach bottle was too big to fit in your cabinet, so to save some space, you pour it into an old 7-Up bottle instead. Although you clearly label it as bleach, there can be the potential of someone seeing the clear liquid and taking a drink without seeing or understanding the label. So making sure nothing is in a container that could possibly be mistaken for something else. If any hazardous materials remain after decluttering, put them in locked cabinets only to be accessed when somebody is around who can safely use them. These tips are of course useful for all of us. Safety in the home is for everyone. Dementia simply adds another layer and the need for vigilance. Fire risks and electrical hazards is another area that applies to everyone when we think about ensuring safety in the home, not just people living with dementia. And you may find that much of this information you already know, but it does bear repeating. Checking the batteries in your smoke alarm and making sure the smoke detector is working. And although it might be tempting, don't throw the breaker if it's wired in simply because it's irritating, because the smoke detector goes off every time you make a batch of cookies or make toast in the morning. Having a working smoke detector is well worth the trade-off as far as real safety and alerting you to problems that might result from any of the following points. If you use space heaters, check and make sure those space heaters are located in a safe position. That means not right beside the curtains, not right next to that pile of old newspapers, not next to a couple of paint cans, and thinking back to that cartoon we saw earlier, not being used as a drying rack. You need to ensure heaters are located in a safe spot with lots of open space around them, and that the cord is running close to a wall and not across a walkway, and that the heater is not being used too close to a person, which can cause a burn. Check your electrical appliances. There is often wear and tear on cords and plugs, and even the on and off switches. So whether you live with the person living with dementia or not, it can be helpful to do an inventory check to make sure that electrical appliances are in good repair. Understanding that dementia is a brain disease, if the part of the brain that's responsible for critical judgment is impaired, the person living with dementia may not pay attention to the smell of rubber that can come, or even recognize that that smell is important information. Significant damage could potentially happen before anybody realizes that something is wrong. The same thing applies to electrical outlets and power bars. Check to ensure that electrical outlets are not overtaxed. That is, look out for the extension cord attached to the power bar that may be attached to another power bar with cords coming out from all over the place. Certainly there are times that it's unavoidable to have extension cords that goes from one end of the room to the other, but have a critical look at the extension cords, what they're being used for, and what's being plugged into them. As much as possible, switch over appliances to ones that have an automatic shut-off, such as a kettle that as soon as it's boiled shuts off on its own, or an iron that if you haven't used it for a couple of minutes, or it's left unmoving and face down for more than a few seconds, will shut off. Essentially looking into whether any appliances that the person would like to continue using is replaced with a version with an automatic shut-off. The bathroom is often called the most unsafe room in the house, and the risk certainly doesn't go down if you're living with dementia. One thing you might want to consider is using a bath mat in the tub. As the disease progresses, you may see the appearance of some of the more commonly shared symptoms. Coordination may be poorer because of changes to the cerebellum, which means that a person's sense of where they are in space is affected. Someone with these brain changes may not be sure about putting their foot down because they're not sure where their foot is in that space. Also, the occipital lobes are often affected and can impact depth perception. So a person may not have a clear sense of how far down things go. And so a bath mat can certainly help to give a bit more stability in the tub, as well as a visual cue as to where the bottom of the tub is. However, make sure that the mat isn't too dark of a color, as because of the changes in the brain, the person living with dementia may believe that they are stepping into a black hole, which understandably can be scary and something nobody wants to do. Also, as dementia progresses, some people become quite afraid of water. And so if you take a fear of water and you add a dark bath mat that seems like a dark, deep hole, it's likely to result in a very high degree of fear and a very understandable resistance into getting into the tub. Water temperature is such an individual thing. And you might like hot water to be really hot so that when you stick dishes in, you know that they're going to be really clean. However, if you're going to wash your hands under that water, you would probably have to turn on more cold water to reduce the temperature. Because of the changes in the brain, someone living with dementia may not be able to exercise that judgment, and so they might put their hands in very hot water and scald themselves, or turn the shower on to full hot and step in. So it's a good idea to lower the temperature of the hot water tank so that the water is not at a dangerous temperature for somebody who might not be checking. An easy access bathtub can make life so much easier if there's any issues around flexibility and coordination. It could be a fully easy access tub with a swing out door, or it can be as simple as adding a good shower chair. Safety bars also can be positioned to help when getting in and out of the tub and shower, and can assist with stability around the toilet. Safety bars are often the first thing that we think about when we think about bathroom safety. It's very important to either do your research or contact an expert to assist with positioning and with secure mounting. These bars need to be able to safely hold an adult's sudden weight if someone's to slip and grabs them for stability. Taller toilets, often called comfort height toilets, is also a safety feature as it can greatly assist with stability and independence. Lastly, you may also want to consider leaving the lights on in the bathroom 24/7. Brightly lit spaces provide a safe environment, and a lit bathroom can be much easier to find at night. Speaking of lighting, good lighting is imperative. Shadows and dim lighting can increase confusion, fall risk, and even lead to hallucinations. Adequate lighting in the home will help with safety. You may love to have your kitchen floor washed and waxed and gleaming so that you can see your face in it. But for some of us who are a little shaky on our feet, this gleaming, slippery surface can mean increased instability. Not having highly waxed floors is safer for someone with cognitive changes because it isn't just the physical danger of slipping on that shiny floor, but the glare itself that can be disorientating. With possible changes to the way the brain processes visual information, the way the light reflects off things may make it difficult to see clearly where the floor is. And if faces are reflected in the floor, it might even be a bit scary, and someone might wonder, is that a pool of water with someone underneath the surface? If you have an occupational therapist come into your home and do a safety assessment, one of the things they will likely identify is scatter rugs. Many of us have small rugs at our doorways and in front of our sinks, but they can be a tremendous tripping hazard. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's caught my toes on a raised corner and stumbled. For those of us who are a bit more uneasy, a stumble can often lead to a fall, so getting rid of any scatter rugs is highly recommended. Or if you can't get rid of them, ensure they have a non-slip backing and are a heavier material without curling edges. Furniture placement is something you might not have thought of, but making sure there's enough room in between the coffee table and your favorite lounge chair, as well as other furniture for easy navigation. It can be helpful to have a walk through the house yourself and look at it from the view of a person who is maybe a little shaky and perhaps has compromised depth perception. They may need a bit more space between the furniture. So take a critical look at how furniture is spaced out, and this can be especially important if the person uses a walker or around the holidays when furniture can often be moved to accommodate having family and friends over or to make room for a Christmas tree. We all get used to furniture being in one spot, and we've all probably had the painful experience of hitting our shins against newly rearranged furniture. The fewer changes that you make in the physical space, the better it is as far as the person living with dementia's ability to adapt. We've already talked about electrical cords with regards to overloading, but you also need to think about them as tripping hazards. Make sure cords are not stretched across doorways or snaking under chairs. And checking to be sure that stair railings are secure and are able to hold the weight of someone if they were to grab them to prevent themselves from tumbling down the stairs. Another thing to look at is whether there's carpet on the stairs, and if it's tacked down properly. Are there any fraying bits on the leading edges of the treads? Are there those little rugs or runners on the stairs? Is it possible for someone to catch their feet on them and trip? One thing that can be really helpful is to check out falls clinics in your community, either through home health or home and community care. At a falls clinic, they do assessment of a person's stability and assess their likelihood of falls and make recommendations. You can also get an occupational therapist to do an assessment in your home. When it's our living space, after a while we just don't see things anymore, so it could be helpful to have somebody with a trained eye come in and take a closer look. We have many options when considering locks for doors and windows. The key question is, who needs to operate the lock and how many entrances and exits do we need? It's never safe to lock somebody in the home, but it is safe to consider permanently locking some doors and windows, adding door alarms where appropriate, and ensuring that a safe entrance and exit route are available at all times. A door alarm is a relatively simple piece of equipment that will set off a buzzer or alarm when the doors open and contact is broken. This can be helpful if it is no longer safe for the person living with dementia to go outside on their own, and a care partner wants to ensure that they're alerted when the door is open. We can also consider different types of locks for different purposes. So for example, it might be that the garage door or the side door is the designated main entrance to the home, and therefore it has a basic deadbolt lock. The front door might be permanently bolted with a barrel bolt situated either high or low on the door, out of line of sight and easy reach, with a door alarm or even a bell in place. And windows could be set to open at only 4 inches each. Backup keys need to be kept in a safe and easily accessible place. And knowing that they will get lost at some point, consider cutting several extra keys. Spare keys can be kept with a neighbor, or if there's no safe place to leave extra keys, a combination lock can be installed. When a person with dementia lives alone, all these options will need to be kept as simple and straightforward as possible. There are a number of different companies that have personal alarms available as either pendants, bracelets, or keychains, and have a variety of functionality, from a simple panic alarm to alarms with fall detection, either with monitoring or not. Importantly, fall alarms won't be able to detect all kinds of falls. So for example, if you were just to slowly slump down, it probably won't register on the alarm. But if you were to fall very abruptly, the alarm would detect this and the person won't even need to press a button. Either a loud siren is set off. If there's monitoring, a call will go through to a call center. And with the increasingly large variety of smartwatches available, you can have health monitoring, built-in GPS locators, and automatic fall detections incorporated right into your smartwatch. Sometimes we get personal alarms or devices for the person living with dementia at the point that we think that they need them, but they never use them. So for example, although your mom wears a pendant around her neck, you come into her place to see that she's fallen. When you say, "Mom, why didn't you press the button?" she responds with, "What button?" Because of the changes in the brain, knowing to press the alarm button after a fall is new learning, and the alarm may have been incorporated when new learning is no longer possible. So we think we're helping by having these alarms, but if you get them at a point where it's very difficult for someone to incorporate that into their learning, they may not be as useful as you hope, other than having the fall detection aspect. So again, we come back to the importance of reviewing and discussing safety as early as possible. When you're trying to provide safety for a person who is living alone, It can be helpful to have a friend or neighbor check in on them on a regular basis, especially if you don't live close by. It could be a simple pop in the morning of, "Hey Louise, how you doing? Everything okay?" Just to make sure that somebody has eyes on the person on a regular basis. Whether you're living on your own or whether you're living with someone with dementia, it's critical to have emergency numbers ready at hand. If there is an emergency, that is the worst time in the world to try and find a phone number because you're in a panic and not thinking clearly. So have a little board posted up right next to the telephone or on the fridge with emergency numbers and your home address. Can provide easy access in an emergency situation. Again, consulting with an occupational therapist can be helpful in giving you a sense of any safety measure gaps that you have in your home. And as mentioned previously, it may be appropriate to consider a monitored personal alarm that can be triggered in the event of a fall or any other emergency. Due to the physical changes happening in the brain, a strong urge to walk could be a common experience for persons living with dementia. Because it also can be connected with disorientation, people living with dementia may not be able to find their way back home if they become lost. This can occur at any time of day or night, and it's particularly scary if it happens at night. And certainly if the person is wandering outdoors, which can be dangerous because of traffic issues, extreme weather, or just even the distance somebody can travel quickly. The need to get out and walk, which is also referred to as wandering, is not dangerous in itself. It's a way for the person to work through emotions, work through anxiety, or work off extra energy. So in itself, it's not a problem. However, often it becomes a problem because they don't have a safe place to move. So it's important that if the person does like to head out, then wherever possible to arrange the environment so that it would be safe for them to do so. About 60% of people living with dementia will at some point have that strong urge to walk. So this is an issue that many will likely have to deal with at some point. As we mentioned previously with personal alarms, a smartwatch may have a GPS locator on it, or you may want to discuss some other kind of locating device. We don't recommend any particular device, but we do suggest that this is a conversation that you should have together as early as possible. Some people feel strongly about their privacy and would not like to be tracked with a locating device. So it's important to have these conversations early. The Alzheimer's Society has a good handout on locating devices, as well as disorientation and getting lost, along with a link to a short video on personal safety with a focus on disorientation and wandering. All are listed on the helpful links document you can find linked below this video. So let's get back to our nightmare picture from the beginning of today's session. You have heard a lot of information in a fairly short amount of time. Have a look at this picture now and identify one risk that you didn't notice the first time you saw this picture. Maybe it was the boxes on the stairs, the electrical cords, or something else. Now think about one thing that you can do to mitigate that risk and begin to make a plan for the coming week. So to summarize, we've looked at a wide range of safety concerns in the home, and I encourage you to identify some key safety risks in your home, especially those that might exist or be intensified because of the impacts of dementia. Hopefully you can start to create a plan to minimize and get around some of those risks. I suggest picking out one room at a time to focus on and using the checklist or resource guide to develop a plan. Have open discussions if you can about the changes that dementia is likely to bring and how you can help to prepare now for safety concerns later. And remember that an occupational therapist or professional specializing in safety can provide solutions. Learning more about wandering and safety measures, and consider the resources that may lessen some safety issues by looking at the links found in the helpful resources document linked below this video. Remember, no one thing is going to ensure safety of the person with dementia, and that you're trying to ensure the utmost safety while still maintaining and promoting independence, something that is true for all of us. If you have a question about anything dementia related, please don't hesitate to call the First Link Dementia Helpline. Our staff are a great resource to strategize with, answer questions, or even just for those times where you want to talk to someone else who understands the dementia journey. This support is available in BC in Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu, Cantonese, Mandarin, Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Support in English is available in BC Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. And in the Yukon, the English line is available Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. And the numbers are listed on the screen.